In this lesson, you'll work through a quick Python refresher. This refresher will cover Python syntax for several concepts. Here are the concepts we'll be reviewing. Don't worry if you don't remember what all these terms mean. They should simply look familiar. If at any point you get stuck, make sure to refer back to the original Coding 101 course or ask a question in the discussion section. Go ahead and navigate to colab.research.google.com. You should then be greeted with a screen like this one. Go ahead and click on New Notebook in the bottom right. Before we begin, let me explain what this interface is. This type of execution environment is called a notebook. A notebook contains different cells like the one I've clicked into right here. We're using a notebook because it's simpler to see visualizations like plots. There are 3 data types we will need for this course. The first data type is a number. The second data type you'll need is a string. A string, if you recall, is a piece of text. You'll always need quotes to denote a piece of text. The third data type is called a boolean. A boolean is just a true or false value. There are several ways to operate on these data types. Here is one such expression. You have 2 numbers and the addition operation. As you might expect, once Python evaluates this expression, the expression will have the value 7. Here is another expression. As you might expect, once Python evaluates this expression, the expression will become true. Let's discuss variables. Here, we assign the variable x to the value 5. Remember from before, we wrote 5 plus 2. We know Python will evaluate this expression to obtain 7. This time, say x is equal to 5. We can then replace 5 with x. Just like before, this expression will evaluate to 7. Let's go ahead and write some code. First up is data types. Here is a number. Type in 5. Once you hit Command Enter or Control Enter on Windows, Python reads, evaluates, and returns the result of this expression. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for a string. Remember your quotes, type in whatever text you'd like, and hit Command Enter or Control Enter. Finally, let's type in a boolean. Run the cell, and there's your output. Second, let's write an operation. Go ahead and type in 5 plus 2. The spaces are optional. Once you hit Command Enter or Control Enter, Python again reads, evaluates, and returns the result of this expression. In this case, this expression is evaluated to become 7, as you might expect. Now, let's type in 5 greater than 2. This, as you may expect, returns the boolean true. Third, let's go ahead and define a variable. X is equal to 5. Again, the spaces are optional. Run the cell, and you can see that there is no output. However, we can output the contents of the variable x by typing in x, Command Enter. Let's go ahead and use this variable. Type in x plus 2. And this, as we might expect, gives us 7. As a refresher, one of 2 collections that we introduced in Coding 101 was a list. We always use square brackets, one to start the list and one to end the list. We also use commas to separate each item in the list. In this case, our items are numbers. As a refresher, a dictionary, the second collection that we covered in Coding 101, maps keys to values. Think of it like your dictionary at home, which maps words to definitions. We always use curly braces, one to start the dictionary and one to end the dictionary. We also use a colon to separate the key from the value. Here, the key is a string, denoted using purple. Here, the value is a number, denoted using pink. The dictionary maps the key Jane to the value 3. We use commas to separate entries in the dictionary. We can also assign a variable to this dictionary. In this case, the variable name is name to cookies. Next, here's how to get data from a dictionary. All we need is the key that we're interested in. In this case, we want Jane's number of cookies, so we would need the key Jane. We use square brackets and the key to get the item. This code will return the number that Jane corresponds to, which is 3. Notice the square bracket notation here, where the square brackets are denoted in black. Back inside of your notebook, the first thing we're going to do is define a list of numbers. Again, we need square brackets and the numbers, or the contents of the list, and commas to separate every single item. Go ahead and run the cell. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for a dictionary. We're going to use curly braces to denote start and end of a dictionary. Then, our keys are going to be a string, and our values are going to be numbers. Add a comma to separate every entry in the dictionary. And now, let's go ahead and define a variable that is equal to this dictionary. So here we'll have name to cookies is equal to Jane of 3 and John of 2. Run the cell once more. Again, because we have defined a variable, there is no output. Let's go ahead and now output the contents of this variable. Run the cell, and there are the contents of the variable. Let's go ahead and access the value for the key Jane. So name to cookies of Jane. We review functions and methods. We will cover both of these concepts before running more code. Think of the functions you learned in math class from grade school. Functions accept some input value and return some value. For example, consider the absolute function. Take in a number and return the positive version of that number. How do I use a function? Consider the absolute value function again. In Python, the function's name is just abs. Use parentheses to call the function. Calling the function means we execute the function. In between the parentheses, add any inputs that the function needs. This absolute value function takes in one input. We also refer to the input as an input argument or just the argument. Each of the data types we've talked about so far, numbers, strings, functions, these are all types of objects, and a method is a function that belongs to an object. In this example, we're going to split a string into a number of smaller strings. First, you need an object. Here we have a string object. Next, add a dot. This dot means we're about to access a method for this string object. Add the method name. In this case, the name is split. The method split will separate the string into many strings, and the rest of these slides will look very much like calling a function. To call this method, just like you would call functions, add parentheses. In between your parentheses, add an input argument. Here are all the parts annotated. From left to right, we need the object, a period, the method name, and the input arguments. Let's try using functions and methods now. Here, type in abs, parentheses, and type in 5. Go ahead and run the cell, and you'll find that we compute the absolute value of 5. Go ahead and repeat the same thing, but now for -5. Run the cell, and we get +5 as expected. We can also run functions that require 2 input arguments. Here we can type in max and pass in 2, 5. And that will return the maximum of the 2 numbers. In this case, we'd expect 5. We can also call the split method as we covered in the slides. Go ahead and type in a list of letters and type in dot, split, parentheses, and then we'll pass in another string, which is what to split the string by. In this case, we want to split at every single comma. Go ahead and run the cell, and you can see now that we've split the string successfully into a number of different parts. Back to the slides for the last segment of this review. The last topic in this refresher is how to define a function. As we mentioned before, think of functions from your math class. In particular, consider the square function. Take in a number x, multiply x with itself, and return the squared number. Here we start off with def. This is how you define a function. Then we follow it with the function name. In this case, it'll be square. Then we add parentheses followed by a colon. In between the parentheses, we add our input argument. In this case, our function square only takes in one argument, which we will call x. Then add 2 spaces. These 2 spaces are extremely important. These spaces are how Python knows you are now adding code to the function. Since this function is simple, the first and only line of our function is a return statement. The return statement stops the function and returns whatever expression comes next. In this case, the expression is x times itself. Here are all the parts annotated once more. Note that all the parts in black are needed to define any function. You always need def, parentheses, and a colon to denote the function is starting. You also need the return statement to return values to the programmer calling your function. The function name, inputs, and expressions can all change. Back inside of your notebook, go ahead and type in def square, parentheses, x, colon. Once you hit enter, Colab will automatically add 2 spaces for you, so go ahead and keep these spaces in and type in return x times x. Run your cell. Now call the function square of 5, run the cell, and we can try this for a different number as well, square of 2. These are the concepts that we've covered in this lesson. If you'd like to access and download these slides, visit this URL, alvin/data101. That concludes our Python refresher. In the next lesson, you'll design the experiment and determine what data to collect.